And so and I'll try to elaborate as much as I can. So this first part is that patients are no longer required to register with DHHS. So the ID cards issued through DHHS remain an option for people who want additional security. Caregivers who are providing for only one family or household member don't need to register. Now this is really important that we got this last part about caregivers caring for one family member or household member really clear, that if your domestic partner gets ill and and their doctor says medical marijuana is good for you, there shouldn't be any sort of bureaucratic red tape to prevent the domestic partner from saying, I'm going to take care of you right now. And it's merely just an agreement between the two parties right there. And it's limited to one. You don't have to register if you're taking care of one patient.
What if both people are, what if both people were patients?
Both people are patients, they're allowed to cultivate together. That was another thing you got. Or if you're a patient, you can be a patient unregistered and a caregiver for a family member who's still not having to register. Because that's the thing, is we focus this bill on patient access, privacy, and care. Is there any other questions about that area?
Yeah, would you recommend getting the ID card for personal security?
My personal opinion?
Yeah.
No. I don't think anyone should register with any department of the government. I think that's intrusive. I think I could go on a whole rant about it.
Okay.
And the reason I say that with a lot of comfort is because the medical marijuana card that you get as a patient is just as good as the doctor's recommendation that you get on tamper-proof paper. It prevents search, seizure, prosecution, arrest, prosecution, or penalty. So if you are stopped by law enforcement and you're a patient, or even if you're stopped by law enforcement and you're a caregiver and a patient, I smell marijuana, sir. I'm a medical marijuana patient. Can I see your recommendation, please? Here it is. Well, I don't think you're a real medical marijuana patient. You can contact my doctor. Right now, Medical Marijuana Caregivers of Maine, the organization that I'm also a part of, we're working with a variety of people across the state, including the Attorney General's office and Representative Mark Diane from Portland, who teaches at the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, to make sure law enforcement has a real clear idea of what this law means and what it means when you encounter someone who has a recommendation, even if they have an attitude. Or if that police officer looks and he says it's a maybe, they're going to not search. They don't want to risk the civil liability right there. And luckily we have people in the MCLU who are very ready to stand by this issue and very ready to take a stand if someone's rights are violated.
Livestock fencing, deer fencing over and a padlock. And it was a female state trooper. She just didn't think it considered to be enclosed. We didn't get in any trouble. We showed her our cards, but I can sleep for 3 days.
Well,
can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I sort of restated.
Yeah.
Restate it.
No, because nobody can do it.
There's no worries. Her issue is that she had this was this summer, this season. This season there was an enclosed lock facility. That was a double fencing, regular fencing and deer fencing with a padlock, and there's a female state police trooper who said that she did not consider that an enclosed lock facility. Now, this is something where another reason why we had to change the law is that they changed the enclosed lock facility to an enclosed lock facility within a building or a greenhouse or a closet. So technically, any outdoor thing would have to be completely enclosed. You'd have to have a roof to it of some sort.
So it's no longer outdoors.
Right.
Right.
Probably 3 feet tall under the fence. So we pulled it and it wasn't mature, and we were quite upset about that.
Well, but it's the whole thing where it's like if, we got the definition put back in where it's an enclosed lock facility, and enclosed lock facility is understood under this legislative record to be within a fenced area.
Right.
So, next season, if you have an issue, if the same state police trooper stops by, you can point out that that is an enclosed lock facility, and you as the card holder or as the card holder or the patient are the key holders of that facility, and so it shouldn't be an issue.
Kind of implying that if you can see it, it's not closed.
That's,
they can go in a helicopter and see it from the top.
Again, and this is one of those things where none of this is legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really, this has not been tested in the court system. We won't see it until it's tested in the court system. But that's one reason why Medical Marijuana Caregivers of Maine is a statewide advocacy organization, is because we're really pressing so we can work with law enforcement and the Attorney General's office so they'll have a clear understanding that this is an enclosed lock facility. If your plants happen to get too tall, that's nature. You don't say corn, don't get too tall because it might block the view of that intersection. You don't see a lot of people doing that. But that's the thing. So that's how we had to get changed. We had to make it so an enclosed lock facility is within a fenced region.
Going back to this idea of registering the state, the new law actually makes a difference between a registered caregiver and a registered patient versus just a patient versus just a caregiver. We're saying if you live with somebody that is recommended by a doctor, you become a caregiver unofficially for the state's eyes.
They have to be,
Right.
they have to be a relative, right? They can't be a household
You know, it's a household member.
Household
Or a relative.
Right.
So, for example, if you were not living with a parent, you can still take care of them. But if you were living with someone who you're a domestic partner with, but it's not like, for example, if you are like a gay couple living together, you're not recognized as family by the state through marriage or whatever, but it's still considered like people living together. You know, you might have a best friend that you've lived with for 20 years, and if you get sick and they're not able to take care of you, we specifically put that in there as a household member. So if you're sharing a dwelling with someone, you can take care of them. Or it's like, you know what, if I got really sick and I was like, Roger, you're the best dope around, can I just move with you and be, you know, enjoy the rest of my days and just watch you great dope? You know, it'd be that, it's that way to do it. But that's why it's also limited to one. That was one of those clear things where it's limited to one family member, one household member.
Another question, enclosed lock facility now, we don't grow outdoors. I mean, it's a mistake we made. We're growing something outdoors, even though we grow indoors also. How does that work, growing indoors? What's considered enclosed and locked? Our house, because we're the only ones living there outside of our cats.
Now, again, this would refer to, I think, a lot of case law, and from my legal analysis, is I think you'd be able to, I forget what the exact word is, but it's the part of your property that's like your domestic house domain, and that's like an area where, like, for example, police can't even do certain, they can't, police can come on your property if it seems a little wild. It's not like your lawn that you use for something actually part of your house to surveil you, but like they can't come into your garden to surveil you because that's considered like a developed part of your house, your property. And so therefore, it isn't my thought that if it's inside your house and you lock your door, and you're a freeholder, and that's the thing. But that's again an unclear area. Whereas if it's your family, it's always a good idea to probably have a secondary door or something, you know. Possibly with a lock if you're living with other people, but if it's a family, I would be very surprised if the judiciary took action saying you need to keep this locked up because you can't control your 14-year-old son. You know what I mean? That type
like I say again, it's just myself and my wife there, and we keep the doors locked.
Right.
Occasionally we'll get a visit from someone coming over to see us. We are in the process of turning a room in our house into something where we're going to have a lock on, so only us two have access.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's what they really mean on a dwelling as an enclosed lock facility.
I think the idea of the whole enclosed lock facility by only access to the key holder was the whole concept is if I was going to lease Roger a room in my in my big warehouse or whatever, and say you're going to grow here, that he would have to be the only one to access it. So it's one of those things where I can't say, you all can rent from me and grow in my big warehouse, and we'll all have one key and access each other's stuff.
No.
You know, who knows who's going where?
That almost wouldn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, again, this is directly out of the citizen-initiated bill, which the people voted on. Do you have a question?
I think we can probably get to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't we move on to some other points and then we can return to this under questions and answers.
Okay. So written certification from a doctor which lasts for 1 year, returns as a legal recruit for a person being a patient. That's doctor recommendation, just as good as the card. They're one and the same. The affirmative defense, which was removed from Maine's medical marijuana law by 1811 this last year, returns, allowing patients a legal defense in court if they are in possession of more than 2.5 ounces. Now, this is a concept where it's, imagine you're in a courtroom. So you're in a courtroom, you're being charged with criminal possession of marijuana because you're a patient and you just took down your 6 plants and you have a pound. So it's over your 2.5 ounce limit. What this affirmative defense allows, and this was specifically put in by Dan Billings, who's the chief legal counsel of the LePage administration. He's a wily bastard, but he's good at what he does. This is put in there, so you can say, Your Honor, I'm a medical marijuana patient, I live on a fixed income, I cannot afford my medicine, I grew this so I have enough for the whole year. And then the judge then has a legal avenue through state law to say, charges are dismissed because this person's in affirmative defense. They're admitting guilt, they're admitting having it, but there's a reason for the breaking the law. Is there any questions about that?
Well, does he have to prove he's only doing that once a year?
Again, that's up to the courts. It allows you to file a motion. Otherwise, if you said, Your Honor, I have all this, medicine because I need it, the judge can say that's great, but unfortunately I have to follow the law. And it says that because if the judge said, good, I'm going to throw out your case, I agree with you, and the prosecution's like, well, we're going to appeal it, the appeals court would say this judge has no legal ground to stand on by dismissing the charge based on their own personal opinion.
Alright, so my question related to this sort of, as in someone who's not registered as a caregiver, would you recommend, say if you're a caregiver for your household member, would it not be good for you to have marijuana in your possession outside of that household? Even if it's 2.5 ounces or less?
If you're a caregiver, you're allowed to possess that amount of marijuana. I don't think it's wise to ever have completely processed marijuana that's over any sort of limit. I don't think that's a wise idea, but at the same time, this affirmative defense is there for patients to allow them illegal access, because we're trying to be realistic in this law. We ask for 10 ounces for patients. Even that's unrealistic if they're getting only able to grow once a year outdoors. But the affirmative defense was again put in by this guy. He's a smart defense lawyer. He's LePage's top lawyer. And it's really my belief that, if I went in there and said, Your Honor, I have 8 pounds because I need it, the judge would probably say, no, I don't believe that. But if someone is like, I've been fighting breast cancer for 4 years, this really helps me, this helps me keep my cancer in reduction, I need 8 pounds to last me until this time next year. The judge might say, well, looking at your medical records and everything, that's totally reasonable.
Also, I heard it's good to label after cutting down stuff.
We can
labels about cure.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, we can get to that in a second. Any questions about the affirmative defense? So the next one about prohibition of search and seizure upon presentation of a valid registration card to the doctor's account. Now, how that's going to work with caregivers is you're going to register with the state, and if you have an unregistered patient, let's say I'm a caregiver, I have 5 patients, none of whom are registered, and I get stopped by a law enforcement officer. I pull out my card that says I'm a caregiver, registered with the state, produce my state-issued ID, and then I would have to produce a contract, which is a DHHS form that should be on the website today, between me and the patient with the patient's contact information, saying that this person is allowing me to cultivate for them and to possess marijuana and transport to them. And then at that point, that would prevent search and seizure.
How do you get a card with 5 unregistered patients?
As of Wednesday, you'll be able to.
It's currently being developed in the rules.
Okay.
But right now DHHS is looking at the fee structure, like saying you will be able to pay $1,500 flat fee annually to have 5 rotating slots for patients. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay $300 per patient. And according to Catherine Cobb, she's still going to have 5 cards. Again, I think the whole thing is they don't even know how to do
for their license.
And again, it's the whole explanation for the whole. I agree with the whole explanation thing, but the problem is that you have to look at what statute says. The medical marijuana program is a self-funded program. They're not going to be charging patients anymore. There's over 2,000 patients in the state. They're losing $200,000 in revenue. They need to. We all know how state contracts work. Something that would cost me $15,000 to do, $1,000 to do. They got a contract out to an Arizona software company for $75,000. It's state government. I can't control that. I think we can all acknowledge that. So, but the thing is, they're going to still milk caregivers, and they're still going to try to milk dispensaries. There's going to be a time for us where we can oppose that, and we can tell them what we think about that. That's during the public hearing for the rules, which is tentatively happening October 17th. I would highly suggest anyone get an MMCM's mailing list, because that's going to be a big focus of ours, is turning out people to this DHHS rule hearing. Because if the governor's office sees there's 200 people out there that come to a rule hearing, that's almost unheard of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions about the search and seizure and how caregiver cards would work?
About caregiver cards, so the caregivers only get 1 card for all patients?
Right now, Kathy Cobb's saying you're going to get 1 card for how many patients you have. So if you pay the $1,500 fee, she will send you 5 medical marijuana cards. Again, the purpose
and
of
you're
it...
not registering the patient when you register with the state.
Right.
But you have to put your patient's name and address and all
No,
that?
you don't.
No, that's the new form.
No, you put that's the contract between you and your patient. And then moving on, DHS will no longer collect a list of people's medical conditions, and the doctor is no longer required to list that in a recommendation. So your tamper-proof piece of paper between you and your doctor, if you have an interaction with law enforcement or anyone else for that matter, it doesn't have your medical condition on there. Like, if I have HIV, I don't need the police officers to need to know I have HIV. Any questions about that?
DHS doesn't need to know know that either.
DHS does not need to know that either. So if you are applying to become a card holding patient, they will not need to know that.
And if you are a card holding patient, you can get it removed.
Yep, we're gonna get to that. So here's a big part for people who have families and who have minors, is that restoration of a decision to make a recommendation to a patient under 18 to the person's doctor if the person's in hospice care. During this law, a person was waiting to get their card and they died, and they were not able to legally medicate because it was caught up in bureaucracy already for over 3 months, and that's, it's a bummer. And then here's the thing: is if they're dealing with someone under 18, then the doctor will have to get a consultation from a list of physicians provided by DHHS. Now, if that physician doesn't respond within 10 days of receiving the request, then they may provide treatment without consultation of another physician. And I know, Douglas, if you're busy, I want to make sure that you have time to present.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you can sum up in about 5 minutes,
But, yeah.
give Dustin a chance to
Sounds
speak
good.
and we'll come back.
But, yeah, I'm happy to hear all this.
Cool. But that whole thing involving a minor came from the case of basically the old form was that there needed to be like a whole group of physicians or like psychiatrists and other people to approve it for a minor. So if you had a child who had a severe illness, and you said medical marijuana, this is what I think will help my child, then there were so many red tape blockages for you to even get a legal avenue to treat your child. Any questions about that?
And so the new law just does away with that pediatric thing entirely, or what's
It makes it so there has to be a list of DHS is going to make a list of consulting physicians. If they never come up with that list, then I guess that's a legal question. I don't know. If you can't consult them.
That's what happened last time. They had
Right, but what they said, I remember when we were there, it's literally you write your recommendation, you have to give it to somebody else, wait 10 days, since that consult, at least during when it went through the hearing, it was supposed to be a non-binding consult.
But it was just ultimately up to the discretion of the commissioner, right? Which it was before.
It wasn't, it's not up to the commissioner,
the way the statute reads is that if, for example, I'm a doctor, I think that my son Dustin should have medical marijuana, I say, all right, I'm going to write this recommendation for him. I look at the DHS list of consulting physicians. Mike is one of them. I contact him. He doesn't get back to me for 2 weeks. After that 10 days,
Dang.
I've already tried. It's proven that then I can legally give that recommendation to Dustin because they did not respond within 10 days. And even if they did respond in 10 days and said no, then
it's not
you can still move forward with it. But I believe that's probably ends up with like a licensing thing.
No, it's on about it. After 10 days, from what I was told, after 10 days, no matter what they come back with,
yeah,
you can treat.
So that's clarification.
Sorry.
This is a really big one, and this is one thing that we actually kind of got working with the Maine Municipal Association. A local government may not adopt an ordinance that is duplicative or more restrictive than the provisions of the law. An ordinance that violates the new law is void and no effect. That's a direct response to Lewiston's attempts to regulate caregivers. I'm not sure how many of you followed that Lewiston was going to require all medical marijuana caregivers to register with the city and the police department.
And pay the money.
Yeah, and pay an additional fee. So it's, again, everyone wants to get their piece of the pie. How much fat can you cut off before there's only bone left? But so we got that in there. So even though they can, it makes it easier for caregivers and patients. So your municipality cannot say, you two cannot be caregivers. You cannot cultivate within this area because there's nothing in statute that says caregivers cannot cultivate within a certain zone. Dispensaries are covered under that, and that's a whole different section. But I'm not here to talk about dispensaries. Any questions about that? So moving on, it's like we have new conditions that can be added to a public petition process at DHHS. The previous law required a board of specialists to be formed by the state in order to add conditions, but the board was never formed. Now this is still in negotiations of the rules process. Again, another reason I think to show up to the public hearing, so if they provide a totally absurd way to try to get a condition added, you can express your discontent with that and try to move forward with that. But right now it's looking like you can't even attempt to add a new condition until January 1st. It doesn't look like the rules are going to apply until January 1st. Any questions?
By new condition, you mean a new health issue that they haven't addressed yet?
Correct.
Right. It's not in the law.
So qualifying patients from other states can access while in Maine if they have the written certification from their doctor, a valid medical marijuana certification from that other jurisdiction, and photo ID or driver's license. So this is going to enable caregivers in the state of Maine to provide short-term care for people who are coming here. And so it's not dispensaries will no longer have a monopoly on that market. And so if someone from California is coming here, what they do is they go to DHH's website, they form approved by DHHS, they get their doctor to fill that out, they take that form, their California medical marijuana card or recommendation, and their state ID, and they can come over here and access medicine. And so that way they're able to have a short-term contract with a caregiver to say, hey, you have really great stuff. I would love to access your medicine. Can you be my caregiver for 2 weeks? I know it's not time to cultivate plants, but I'm able to compensate you then for receiving my medicine when I'm here. So that's one of those things that will make it really good for caregivers, especially looking from other states.
I don't know if that's in here, but is that going to work the opposite? If a person leaves Maine and they go visit relatives out in Colorado, they're going to be able to access care out there?
You have to check Colorado laws.
Colorado does allow.
But we have... Yeah,
so it has to do with the state, whether they allow it or not.
A lot of the western states actually are used to seeing cards. Almost all of them have.
So they probably won't accept your recommendation, but if you're registered with the state, they might accept it.
They might. This out of state doesn't. They're pretty lenient.
Yeah, Colorado's supposed to be pretty.
It does, yes.
It is.
You can only serve a maximum of 5, persist a maximum of 5 patients.
Like a 2 week.
Even if it's only for a day or not. Any questions about that? No. So 2 patients who are family members of the same household may share a growing facility. This is specifically due to one of our board members at MMCM and members of MMCM, where it was the concern that people are patients or caregivers together, that they won't be able to share the same facility, because previously the Department of Health and Human Services was saying you would have to have a distinct barrier to separate whose grow was what and label the plants like. So if you two were sharing a grow, you'd have to have a wall between your grow room of some sort to distinguish.
One pink, one blue.
That was under 1811, under DHHS rule. And so we got this put into statute, so they can't adjust it by rule. It has to be changed by law.
So our co-op's pretty much out of the question.
I'll get to that in a minute. That'll be probably the hot topic. But we can discuss that in a little bit. Caregivers are no longer subject to DHHS inspection. No inspection for caregivers. Any questions? Registered caregivers are no longer required to share patient information with DHHS to register. Any questions? Food preparation by a caregiver or family household member can be done in a home kitchen. There's no longer a requirement to get a license for this as a food establishment. So, you as a caregiver, don't cheer yet. If you want to prepare food in your house for your patient, you still need to have a state certified kitchen. But if you go over to your patient's house and you help them prepare it there, that's completely legal because it's in their house, in their kitchen. Read that as you will. Any questions about that? Alright, almost to the end. Okay, so a patient can grow a portion of their allowed plants and designate a dispensary or caregiver to grow the rest of the amount. Now this is really put there to improve patient access. So this is saying like, I'm a patient, I know you guys are caregivers, I want to try my hand at outdoor cultivation this year. I'm going to grow 4 outdoor plants, and you can grow 2 indoor plants. It would still allow me to access my 2.5 ounces every 15 days from you, so I can still get my medicine from you, while attempting to grow my own plants to have my own sufficient supply. And because it's based on a contract system now, if you're not a registered patient, it makes it much easier to adjust that. So if I'm like, well geez, you know, I'm now down to 2 plants and they're dead, and you're like, well I'd love to throw 2 more plants in the flowering room, so I can tear up the contract, write a new one, 4 plants, now you do 4, now I do 2. And so again, that's really put there to increase patient access. And you know, the best way to try to encourage patients to grow their own if possible, because it's, you know, it's tough to grow inside and it costs money. And so this way it's really putting power back into the patient's hands. Any questions about that?
I don't know if this really applies so much to this. I had already asked this question to the other guy that was with you there at your booth. And, okay, we grow. What happens if we go upstairs and for some reason spider mites have just spread the room and they destroy the plants? Now we have nothing.
Yep.
Where do we get more clones? Where do we get more bud that we might need to vaporize or make medibles out of or whatever?
Yeah, it would have to be donated to you from a caregiver, patient, or dispensary. And that's something that falls under rules jurisdiction, which again, that we specifically got put back into the rules so that there could be that flow, but no compensation can be received. Again, another important reason why medical marijuana caregivers in Maine exists is because if you're a caregiver within our network and that happens to you, you can contact us and say, my patients are in dire need of medicine and they're in need of, I need of plants to grow. We can put a call out to the list. People who contact us back, we give them your contact information, and you guys can meet, figure something out. But it's that way. It's like, so we're providing a networking source so people can get together. And if there's a need, a lot of our Maine Green Cross group that work to help change this law too, a really great group. They're all about getting people started up with clones. They will meet with you and give you some clones. Any other questions? All right, the final thing is 2 primary caregivers who are members of the same family or household can share the enclosed lock facility. Husband and wives can share the same enclosed lock facility, allowing them to serve up to 10 patients. But they have to be household family members, live in the same household, or be domestic partners or family. So for example, if you two live together, let's say you wanted to have an outbuilding, you'd be able to have an outbuilding somewhere and still cultivate together. But if it was just like you and me, we weren't living together, we wouldn't be able to have that because we're not household members or family.
Is that limited to 2?
Limited to 2.
Okay.
They don't accept polyamory yet.
Well, no, I'm just saying if there's 3 adults in the house.
That's what they wanted. But that allows those two caregivers though, which is really important. So it could be a husband, wife, or 2 people living domestically be caregivers teams without being collectives. Now the problems that need to be addressed is that there's abandoned caregiver cooperatives, unreasonable plant limits, and the new law allows caregivers to give access to dispensaries, but not allow any reimbursement in dispensaries. And maybe we could chew on that for a little bit and
Okay.
move on.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, let's give it a hand. Okay, I'm going to do something real quick just to let you folks know that there are 3 dispensaries open in the state now. One is in Biddeford. Oh, 5, okay. Auburn, Fort Kent, and what's the other 2 towns?
Washington and Thomaston is open.
Okay. Our next speaker is Dr. Dustin Sulak. He is an osteopathic doctor. He has an office in Hollow, Maine, and he has a satellite office in, is it Falmouth? Am I correct? Okay. Now, Dustin, as a young intern at FMI at Maine General, had a huge impact. And when he left there, he set up his own practice, and he came to us on the committee, and his office provided space for us to meet. He's always been supportive of medical marijuana, and so Dustin, if you want to give us a few words on medical marijuana.
Sure. I'll sit up here so everybody can see me. And really, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I can talk a little bit and then field your questions, and if you'd like to hear more, then I'd be happy.
Well, you might want to just say how you came
Sure.
to medical marijuana.
Sure. I'll give you a little bit of background. My education, I have 2 bachelor degrees in nutrition and biology. Throughout my whole life, I've been interested in natural health and ways to stay healthy, promote healing, and really explore the nature of the healing process and how to interface with it. I went to medical school at an osteopathic school in Phoenix, Arizona, and then came up to Maine for my residency. In my residency program, there was a faculty member who was instrumental in the first medical marijuana law that happened back in '99, and one of the only doctors in the state who had been practicing that, so a bit of a mentor. I also had another cannabis researcher as a mentor during medical school. So I have some background in this. After I left residency and became a general practitioner, which coincided time-wise with this most recent expansion of the scope of the medical marijuana law in 2009, where more chronic conditions were added to the list of qualifying conditions. As I began my practice, I recognized the huge demand for medical marijuana evaluations and the reluctance of other physicians to provide that service for patients, mostly due to irrational fears or simply uneducation, misinformation, or ignorance. So I got more into this. My true work that I do with patients on a regular basis is more healing arts oriented. I'm an osteopathic physician, so I treat people with my hands. I'm a Reiki sensei and do other forms of energy medicine, and also I'm a hypnotherapist. But I find that all these other natural healing modalities work very well alongside this one botanical that just has some incredible properties. And while marijuana might not be the right medicine for everyone, what I've observed in my practice has been that it is the most versatile single medicine that can be applied to the most common ailments in our people in our society here today. It's very useful, and it's almost like 1,000 medicines in one, because there's so many different strains and delivery systems and ways of using different parts of the plant. It's just an extremely useful and safe medicine for what we're going through as a people right now. And I've seen some amazing results in my practice. So I can tell you about the conditions that would qualify a patient currently under Maine law. There's cancer, there's a few neurological conditions, including spasticity, which might be due to multiple sclerosis or cerebral palsy or a spinal cord injury. There's seizure disorders and ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease. There's gastrointestinal disorders, severe nausea, wasting syndrome, which is the inability to eat and keep weight on, also known as cachexia. Crohn's disease, which is an inflammatory disorder of the intestines. And hepatitis C, which is a viral infection of the liver. There's, what am I missing here? The big one is chronic pain, which is defined as pain that has been refractory to conventional therapy for 6 months. So what that means is some pain complaint, whether it's a gradual onset of a pain or an acute pain from an injury, a patient that's been following up with a conventional medical plan for 6 months, and at the end of that 6 months, if they're still having pain, then they qualify for medical marijuana. And what ends up happening in my office is I see a lot of patients that have been diagnosed by specialists and treated by other physicians for some amount of time, and many of them are still on these conventional treatments. Some are naive to marijuana, meaning they haven't experienced it, or they might have tried it, once or twice and noticed that it did something for them. And I routinely see that when patients start using marijuana regularly, especially in the right dosage and delivery system, really incredible results, significant decreases in the current medications that they require, significant improvements in their quality of life. All the other factors that go around pain or some of these other conditions like sleep, mood and emotional health, stress level, ability to interact in a positive way with their family and with their community. And some of these really important things that marijuana seems to do for people, like provide a feeling of being in the present moment, feeling more connected to their own body, feeling a connection to something greater than themselves, like their community or a higher power. And it's really affecting people in a very holistic way. And the other wonderful thing about it is that my patients who might not have insurance or might not have a lot of money can grow this for themselves and actually sustainably produce their own medicine. So it's just a wonderful option for a lot of patients in a lot of ways. There are side effects, and I do see some side effects in my patients. Most of them are tolerable, and a lot of them can be relieved by adjusting the dosage and the strain and the frequency of the cannabis use. So it's just a really nice medicine. I've been learning a lot from my patients. I also have plenty of patients that have been using this medicine for longer than I've been alive, and through the years have had to go through a trial and error process of figuring out how to have a positive relationship with this medicine and fine-tuning that relationship. And what's so wonderful about what's happening here in the cannabis community, the medical marijuana community, is the sharing of information. It's no longer taboo and kept on the down low. It's out there. People are talking about what's working for them. Patients are helping each other. Patients are giving medicine to each other. I mean, it's really a beautiful mutualism that I've seen happening. And I walk out to my waiting room to lock up after a long day at the office, and there's a group of activists sitting there, changing the law. It's just beautiful to see how people are coming together for this. So I'd be happy to take any questions, and then if there's any topics that you
And actually, before we get to the questions, we'd like to ask a question, or I'd like to ask two questions of the audience. How many of you here are patients? Okay. How many of you are caregivers? Okay, it just gives us an idea of who you are, and so on. So
nobody's keeping track, I hope. And if you didn't want to answer, that's okay too.
There's definitely sheriffs around too. There's a lot more police here than last year.
I don't think that's the right attitude, though. We really don't care.
I know. I'm
Right.
just-
Right, so it's not,
Right.
but still there's an issue of your privacy. And
Right.
everything.
Or they didn't have to hold up their hand.
That's for sure. So, you had a
Oh, I
question?
didn't say anything.
Yeah, my question was around Rick Simpson's hemp oil,
Yep.
and how is that treated under the law, and how, if you've had experience with that.
I can't really speak to the legal aspects of that. Paul probably can. I do have experience with several patients that have been using very high
Okay,
potency.
Dustin, make sure, does everybody understand who Rick Simpson is or what they're
Oh yeah, let me go back.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roger. So, so the question was about a high potency cannabis oil concentrate, and there's different ways of making such a concentrate. But one that's been very popular on the internet is it goes by the name of the person who put the video out. His name is Rick Simpson, and he's a cannabis activist in Canada, and has collected some video documentary case reports of people that have used this high dosage cannabinoid medicine to treat a variety of conditions in a curative way, including cancer and very serious neurodegenerative disorders. So that's the question. You know, so I'll first just speak to high dosage cannabinoid, because that's really the general of what we're talking right now. So I see that most of my patients do very well with actually a very low dose of cannabis, and usually low dose is better than a high dose in a lot of people. There's something that happens, and it's different for every individual, but there's a certain dosage and frequency, and when you go beyond that dosage and frequency, a person starts building tolerance to the medicine. The effects decrease. Does anyone have a sip of water or anything by the way?
No, I don't have any water left. But
Let me gather some saliva. Give me a moment.
I got some.
Well,
Oh, okay.
I'll just take a little.
Thank you.
what else was up there? Jesus Christ.
So,
He's got some.
that was much better. Oh, thanks.
She's gonna have a well.
All I needed was a sip. So the above this, you know, we start building tolerance above this dosage and frequency, and the effects diminish, and the requirements increase. But what we see happening below a certain dosage is a sensitization process, where I've been talking a lot these last few days, where people need a lower and lower dosage over time to get the same effects. Their body, and this is shown scientifically, that a person can actually start making more cannabinoid receptors in their cells, and those receptors actually can become more sensitive with a lower dosage. And we see this, so I see all the time people that are like smoking a lot or using a lot, getting moderate results, and the person who's taking like 1 or 2 puffs 2 or 3 times a day and like covered the whole day and doing really well. And so I look deeper into this, and there is a scientific basis for that. It's different for every person. However, I do see people that have really given that a shot and done, had that relationship and found that still when they consume higher amounts of cannabis, it's just better for them. That's what's working better. So I think we're all unique individuals. There's no blueprint for dosing cannabis. It's more about a relationship. When we get into very high potency extracts, like this Rick Simpson oil or other concentrates, we're talking about a dosage that might be several ounces per week ingested in the form of a concentrate that you might absorb through your mouth or swallow. And this is much more likely to give someone side effects, especially strong psychoactive side effects. For that reason, it's good to work your way slowly up to it. As far as results that I've seen, most people that want to try this are usually treating cancer. I have a handful of cancer patients that are using this, and the scientific basis is there. I mean, in a laboratory, when we expose cancer cells, and in animals, when we expose cancer cells to high levels of cannabinoids, they die. And usually cancer cells, yeah, cancer cells. This cancer cells die by like 4 different mechanisms of action. It really prevents blood growth to the tumors, and it prevents the tumors from spreading, prevents them from growing and replicating. And this is something that our bodies are doing anyways all the time with our own cannabinoids. So it's just fitting into part of this natural mechanism.
Can you get to that level just by smoking it, or do you have to go with the high potent
Well,
ingestion?
I don't think you can get there by smoking it. I wouldn't recommend trying. Because if you think about it, every time you take a puff, when you exhale, there's actually medicine in your exhalation. So imagine like somehow recycling that, getting all the cannabinoids out, and still going through two ounces a week or so. Yeah. I don't think so, but maybe. You know, I think it'd be wiser just to have an extract that has potentially been heated, so it's decarboxylated and ready to be absorbed. So I don't have any good results from my practice using this technique, but it's a little too early to tell. I have a
Is anybody keeping track?
Yeah,
I know a
we're
patient who's
keeping
used it.
track. You know, I've seen patients that have told me that this has worked, and I've seen patients that have started this therapy that have some promising early results. But I don't. I mean, really, to evaluate something like this, I need at least 5 years to like see for myself if this is working. But I think that the rationale for trying it is there, and the other thing is such a fledgling knowledge base when it comes to cannabinoids and cancer or some of these very strong autoimmune diseases, because the different cannabinoids affect these cells differently. So what we might see with a high THC strain might be very different from what we see with a high CBD strain. And so the science is really just at the beginning levels right now. But in the meantime, it's something that people can grow. It's something that people can safely use as an adjunct to conventional treatment. So if somebody's getting chemotherapy or radiation, adding a high dose cannabis extract could be a very good option for them, because not only might it help them with their symptoms, but it also might help them actually fight the disease.
I was struck by sort of how limited the list of conditions is that you've listed. And is that something that's being addressed on the legislative front or any other way?
Yeah, incremental steps. But like Paul mentioned, it's going to be before January that we can really try to do something. Initially, in 2009, a few conditions were added. That was a bonus. And then between 2009 and 11, there was a system in place for adding conditions, but it required a board of 10 specialist doctors. The DHHS was going to get together. Nobody volunteered, and it just never happened. So we petitioned them several times to add important conditions, and I think this is a really big issue, because I very frequently see people with mental health diagnoses that are comorbidities. They also have chronic pain, or they also have cancer, or they also have one of these other conditions, but they have a mental health issue like depression, PTSD, anxiety disorder, bipolar are the four most common ones. ADD is up there too, and even OCD and Tourette's. These conditions respond very well to marijuana, and yes, I can approve them for their chronic pain condition or for their cancer or whatever else. But in the meantime, they're telling me, yeah, it's helping my pain, but it's helping incredibly with my attention deficit issue or with my PTSD. So that's a push that we're looking forward to, is getting to add strategically the conditions that will help the most people out there. And a big concern is with veterans, and there's so many veterans coming back with PTSD, and this is a medicine that's affordable and realistic for them to use in a sustainable long-term manner.
Yeah, I got a question on something. When it comes to the different conditions, okay, now they got a big long list of conditions that you can use cannabis for. I mean, to me, that's fine, but it's almost not good enough, because they got so many different types of strains that have various amounts of CBD or THC and vice versa, which may work for, let's say, one might work for arthritis, but it won't work for PTSD. Is this something in the works where either caregivers, doctors, or even the dispensaries are going to work with the patient and say, well, what do you have? Well, what's on your list that the doctor recommended cannabis? And they can say, well, I got PTSD. And that they can say, well, this is what you need. This is the strain you need.
It's a great question. The question is, there's so many different conditions and there's so many different strains and delivery systems. What are we doing to try to mash them up so a patient with a certain diagnosis can find the right medicine, especially as the list of diagnoses increases and the different fields of medicine broadens. you know, what can we do to help patients get the right stuff? Is there anything we can, you know what? We have a lot of open chairs in here. I see.
Actually,
like,
there might be some people starting to move in now for the next one.
oh, is this the next one? Got it.
No, but it's 3:53 and we're going to go until 3:55, okay?
We got a couple more minutes.
Right.
So anyways,
and actually I wanted to ask you a question. You were talking earlier about this amount. I know that whenever you do mushrooms, you're supposed to do, what is it, a gram per 100-pound body weight. Does THC have a thing where it responds to different body weights? I mean, like me as a bigger guy, do I have to consume more?
likely yes.
Good, I've got that excuse. I always wanted to have it.
I wouldn't think it's a lot, you know, it's not a lot more. Just look at percentage ratio of body weight versus medicine. Yeah, that would
Okay.
probably, you know, it's
So it
blood
does have
But
an
I want to
impact.
answer this question first, which was, you know, getting people to the right medicine. And I think that the best way to do that is with an online forum. I mean, it's certainly the most fast and efficient. And my Falmouth office has actually already been looking into that. There's, you know, people already doing similar things in California. It hasn't really caught on in a big way, but it's ready to. So we're going to bring something like that to Maine, and eventually have, you know, probably a nation or worldwide. What it will be is a community-based clinical research tool, so that we can gather information from all the patients, from the caregivers and dispensaries, and analyze all that data and really broaden our understanding of what's working for who.
I think another way in keeping with that is writing your own strain reports and sharing that with other patients, as well as educating yourself about the effects and what you can expect from it. Just a lot of like communicating and networking, passing on information that you've learned.
So this was a suggestion for growers and caregivers to write strain reports and put that information out there to be passed around. And I've never seen a strain report before. I'd like that.
Really?
Treating yourself.
Oh, treating yourself. Got it. Okay.
Treating yourself.
Relief.
Strain report, like a different type of marijuana.
They break it down.
Great. Thanks. I actually
Okay,
haven't
folks,
been-
it's about 5 of, and we'll be having another group moving in here. I'd like to thank Dustin here again. And Paul. And over in the next booth, in the next tent, excuse me, there is a booth for the
Medical marijuana caregivers in Maine. And so, again, I highly suggest you all come over and at least check us out. Hopefully sign up for our mailing list and contact list, because we're really trying to move forward and do a lot of the things that you guys are talking about that needs to be adjusted with, legislatively. We are the medical marijuana legislative presence in the State House.
And we are actually putting together a forum to attach to our website that will be a community-based forum.
Nice.
And for those of you that didn't get that pass out, they're up here on the table, okay? Thank you all very much.